Karl Benz was born in Karlsruhe on November 25, 1844, the son of an engine driver. His father died just 2 years after Karl's birth. Despite her limited financial means, his mother ensured that he received a good education. Karl Benz attended high school, then studied at the Polytechnic College in Karlsruhe. This was followed by 2 years of practical study at Maschinenbaugesellschaft in Karlsruhe. Karl Benz was given his first paid employment as a technical draftsman and designer by a manufacturer of weighing machines in Mannheim. On losing this position in 1868, he joined an engineering company which was primarily involved in bridge building. This employment was followed by a short period in Vienna, likewise with a structural iron working company. Karl Benz was a German engine designer and automotive engineer. His Benz patent motor wagon from 1885 is considered the first practical modern automobile and first car put into series production. He received a patent for the motor car in 1886, the same year he first publicly drove the Benz patent motor wagon. His company Benz & Cie, based in Mannheim, was the world's first automobile plant and largest of its day. In 1926, it merged with Daimler Motorengesellschaft to form Daimler-Benz, which produces the Mercedes-Benz among other brands. Benz is widely regarded as the father of the car as well as the father of the automobile industry. Karl Benz was born Karl Friedrich Michael Vaillant on November 25, 1844 in Mühlberg, now a borough of Karlsruhe, Baden-Württemberg, which is part of modern Germany. His parents were Josephine Vaillant and a locomotive driver, Johann Georg Benz, whom she married a few months later. According to German law, the child acquired the name Benz by legal marriage of his parents. When he was 2 years old, his father died of pneumonia, and his name was changed to Karl Friedrich Benz in remembrance of his father. Despite living in near poverty, his mother strove to give him a good education. Benz attended the local school in Karlsruhe and was a prodigious student. In 1853, at the age of 9, he started at the scientifically oriented Lyceum. Next he studied at Karlsruhe's Polytechnical School under the instruction of Ferdinand Rettenbacher. Benz had originally focused his studies on locksmithing, but he eventually followed his father's steps toward locomotive engineering. On September 30, 1860, at age 15, he passed the entrance exam for mechanical engineering for the Karlsruhe Polytechnical School, which he subsequently attended. Benz graduated on July 9, 1864, aged 19. Following his formal education, Benz had 7 years of professional training in several companies, but did not fit well in any of them. The training started in Karlsruhe with 2 years of varied jobs in a mechanical engineering company. He then moved to Mannheim to work as a draftsman and designer in a scales factory. In 1868 he went to Pforzheim to work for the bridge building company Gebrüder Benckiser Eisenwerke und Maschinenfabrik. Finally, he went to Vienna for a short period to work at an iron construction company. Benz's first factory and early inventions, 1871 to 1882. In 1871, at the age of 27, Benz joined August Ritter, in launching the iron foundry and mechanical workshop in Mannheim, later renamed Factory for Machines for Sheet Metal Working. The enterprise's first year went very badly. Ritter turned out to be unreliable, and the business's tools were impounded. The difficulty was overcome when Benz's fiancée, Bertha Ringer, bought out Ritter's share in the company, using her dowry. 1112. On July 20, 1872, Benz and Bertha Ringer married. They had 5 children: Eugen, 1873, Richard, 1874, Clara, 1877, Thilda, 1882, and Ellen, 1890. Despite the business misfortunes, Benz led in the development of new engines in the early factory he and his wife owned. To get more revenue, in 1878 he began to work on new patents. First, he concentrated on creating a reliable petrol 2-stroke engine. Benz finished his two-stroke engine on December 31, 1879, and was granted a patent for it on June 28, 1880. While designing what would become the production standard for his two-stroke engine, Benz patented the speed regulation system, the ignition using sparks with battery, the spark plug, the carburetor, the clutch, the gear shift, and the water radiator. Benz's Gasmotorenfabrik Mannheim, 1882–1883. Problems arose again when the banks at Mannheim demanded that the Benz's enterprise be incorporated due to the high production costs it maintained. They were forced to improvise an association with photographer Emil Bühler and his brother, a cheese merchant, to get additional bank support. The company became the joint stock company Gasmotorenfabrik Mannheim in 1882. After all the necessary incorporation agreements, Benz was unhappy because he was left with merely 5% of the shares and a modest position as director. Worst of all, his ideas weren't considered when designing new products, so he withdrew from that corporation just 1 year later, in 1883. Benz and CIE and the Benz patent Motorwagen. Benz's lifelong hobby brought him to a bicycle repair shop in Mannheim owned by Max Rose and Friedrich Wilhelm Esslinger. In 1883, the three founded a new company producing industrial machines, Benz and Company Rhenus Gasmotorenfabrik, usually referred to as Benz and CIE. Quickly growing to 25 employees, it soon began to produce static gas engines as well. The success of the company gave Benz the opportunity to indulge in his old passion of designing a horseless carriage. Based on his experience with, and fondness for, bicycles, he used similar technology when he created an automobile. It featured wire wheels, unlike carriage's wooden ones, with a 4-stroke engine of his own design between the rear wheels, with a very advanced coil ignition and evaporative cooling rather than a radiator. Power was transmitted by means of 2 roller chains to the rear axle. Benz finished his creation in 1885 and named it Benz Patent Motorwagen. The Motorwagen was patented on January 29, 1886 as DRP 37435, automobile fueled by gas. The 1885 version was difficult to control, leading to a collision with a wall during a public demonstration. The first successful tests on public roads were carried out in the early summer of 1886. Benz first publicly drove the car on July 3, 1886 in Mannheim at a top speed of 16 km per hour 10 miles per hour. The next year Benz created the Motorwagen Model 2, which had several modifications, and in 1889, the definitive Model 3 with wooden wheels was introduced, showing at the Paris Expo the same year. Benz began to sell the vehicle, advertising it as Benz Patent Motorwagen, in the late summer of 1888, making it the first commercially available automobile in history. The second customer of the Motorwagen was a Parisian bicycle manufacturer Émile Roger, who had already been building Benz engines under license from Benz for several years. Roger added the Benz automobiles, many built in France, to the line he carried in Paris, and initially most were sold there. The early 1888 version of the Motorwagen had only 2 gears and could not climb hills unaided. This limitation was rectified after Bertha Benz drove one of the vehicles a great distance and suggested to her husband the addition of a 3rd gear for climbing hills. In the course of this trip she also invented brake pads. Bertha Benz's long-distance drive. The world's first long-distance automobile trip was undertaken by Bertha Benz using a Model 3. On the morning of August 5, 1888, Bertha, supposedly without the knowledge of her husband, took the vehicle on a 104 km 65 miles trip from Mannheim to Pforzheim to visit her mother, taking her sons Eugen and Richard with her. In addition to having to locate pharmacies along the way to refuel, she repaired various technical and mechanical problems. One of these included the invention of brake lining. After some longer downhill slopes she ordered a shoemaker to nail leather onto the brake blocks. Bertha Benz and Sons finally arrived at nightfall, announcing the achievement to Karl by telegram. It had been her intention to demonstrate the feasibility of using the Benz motor wagon for travel and to generate publicity in the manner now referred to as live marketing. Today, the event is celebrated every 2 years in Germany with an antique automobile rally. In 2008, the Bertha Benz Memorial Route was officially approved as a route of the industrial heritage of mankind, because it follows Bertha Benz's tracks of the world's first long-distance journey by automobile in 1888. The public can now follow the 194 kilometers 121 miles of signposted route from Mannheim via Heidelberg to Pforzheim, Black Forest, and back. The return trip, which didn't go through Heidelberg, was along a different, slightly shorter route, as shown on the maps of the Bertha Benz Memorial Route. Benz's Model 3 made its wide-scale debut to the world in the 1889 World's Fair in Paris. About 25 motor wagons were built between 1886 and 1893. Benz and CIE expansion. The great demand for static internal combustion engines forced Benz to enlarge the factory in Mannheim, and in 1886 a new building located on Waldhofstrasse, operating until 1908, was added. Benz and CIE had grown in the interim from 50 employees in 1889 to 430 in 1899. During the last years of the 19th century, Benz was the largest automobile company in the world with 572 units produced in 1899. Because of its size, in 1899, Benz and CIE became a joint stock company with the arrival of Friedrich von Fischer and Julius Ganz, who came aboard as members of the board of management. Ganz worked in the commercialization department, which is somewhat similar to marketing in contemporary corporations. The new directors recommended that Benz should create a less expensive automobile suitable for mass production. From 1893 to 1900 Benz sold the four-wheel, two-seat Victoria, a two-passenger automobile with a 2.2 kilowatts, 3.0 HP, engine, which could reach the top speed of 18 km per hour 11 miles per hour and had a pivotal front axle operated by a roller chain tiller for steering. The model was successful with 85 units sold in 1893, and was produced in a four-seated version with face-to-face seat benches called the vis-a-vis. From 1894 to 1902, Benz produced over 1,200 of what some consider the first mass-produced car, the Velocipede, later known as the Benz Velo. The early Velo had a 1L 1.5 metric horsepower, 1.5 HP, 1.1 kilowatts, engine, and later a 3 metric horsepower, 3 HP, 2 kilowatts, engine, giving a top speed of 19 km per hour 12 miles per hour. The Velo participated in the world's first automobile race, the 1894 Paris to Rouen, where Émile Roger finished 14th, after covering the 126 kilometers 78 miles in 10 hours 01 minute at an average speed of 12.7 kilometers per hour 7.9 miles per hour. In 1895, Benz designed the first truck with an internal combustion engine in history. Benz also built the first motor buses in history in 1895, for the Netfener Bus Company. In 1896, Benz was granted a patent for his design of the first flat engine. It had horizontally opposed pistons, a design in which the corresponding pistons reached top dead center simultaneously, thus balancing each other with respect to momentum. Many flat engines, particularly those with 4 or fewer cylinders, are arranged as Boxer engines, Boxer motor in German, and also are known as horizontally opposed engines. This design is still used by Porsche, Subaru, and some high-performance engines used in racing cars. In motorcycles, the most famous Boxer engine is found in BMW Motorrad, though the Boxer engine design was used in many other models, including Victoria, Harley-Davidson XA, Zundap, Wooler, Douglas Dragonfly, Rothier, Universal, IMZ Ural, Dnepr, Nomi Tyrone, Changjiang, Marusho, and the Honda Goldwing. Although Gottlieb Daimler died in March 1900 and there is no evidence that Benz and Daimler knew each other nor that they knew about each other's early achievements eventually, competition with Daimler Motorengesellschaft, DMG, in Stuttgart began to challenge the leadership of Benz and CIE. In October 1900, the main designer of DMG, Wilhelm Maybach, built the engine that would later be used in the Mercedes 35 HP of 1902. The engine was built to the specifications of Emil Jelinek under a contract for him to purchase 36 vehicles with the engine, and for him to become a dealer of the special series. Jelinek stipulated the new engine be named Daimler Mercedes, for his daughter. Maybach would quit DMG in 1907, but he designed the model and all of the important changes. After testing, the first was delivered to Jelinek on December 22, 1900. Jelinek continued to make suggestions for changes to the model and obtained good results racing the automobile in the next few years, encouraging DMG to engage in commercial production of automobiles, which they did in 1902. Benz countered with Parsifal, introduced in 1903 with a vertical twin engine that achieved a top speed of 60 km per hour 37 miles per hour. Then, without consulting Benz, the other directors hired some French designers. France was a country with an extensive automobile industry based on Maybach's creations. Because of this action, after difficult discussions, Benz announced his retirement from design management on January 24, 1903, although he remained as director on the board of management through its merger with DMG in 1926 and remained on the board of the new Daimler-Benz Corporation until his death in 1929. Benz's sons Eugen and Richard left Benz and CIE in 1903, but Richard returned to the company in 1904 as the designer of passenger vehicles. That year, sales of Benz and CIE reached 3,480 automobiles, and the company remained the leading manufacturer of automobiles. Along with continuing as a director of Benz and CIE, Benz founded another company, C. Benz Sony, with his son Eugen and closely held within the family, a privately held company for manufacturing automobiles. The brand name used the first initial of Benz's first name, Karl. Blitzen Benz. In 1909, the Blitzen Benz was built in Mannheim by Benz and CIE. The bird-beaked vehicle had a 21.5-liter, 1312 CI, 150 kilowatts, 200 HP, engine, and on November 9, 1909 in the hands of Victor Hemery of France, the land speed racer at Brooklands, set a record of 226.91 kilometers per hour 141.00 miles per hour, said to be faster than any plane, train, or automobile at the time, a record that was not exceeded for 10 years by any other vehicle. It was transported to several countries, including the United States, to establish multiple records of this achievement. Benz Sony, 1906 to 1923. Karl Benz, Bertha Benz, and their son, Eugen, moved 10 kilometers, 6.2 miles, east of Mannheim to live in nearby Ladenburg, and solely with their own capital, founded the private company, C. Benz Sons, German, Benz Sony, in 1906, producing automobiles and gas engines. The latter type was replaced by petrol engines because of lack of demand. This company never issued stocks publicly, building its own line of automobiles independently from Benz and CIE, which was located in Mannheim. The Benz Sons automobiles were of good quality and became popular in London as taxis. In 1912, Benz liquidated all of his shares in Benz Sons and left the family-held company in Ladenburg to Eugen and Richard, but he remained as a director of Benz and CIE. During a birthday celebration for him in his hometown of Karlsruhe on November 25, 1914, the 70-year-old Benz was awarded an honorary doctorate by his alma mater, the Karlsruhe University, thereby becoming Dr. Ing. H.C. Benz. 2829. Almost from the very beginning of the production of automobiles, participation in sports car racing became a major method to gain publicity for manufacturers. At first, the production models were raced and the Benz Velo participated in the first automobile race, Paris to Rouen 1894. Later, investment in developing race cars for motorsports produced returns through sales generated by the association of the name of the automobile with the winners. Unique race vehicles were built at the time, such as the first mid-engine and aerodynamically designed Tropfenwagen, a teardrop body introduced at the 1923 European Grand Prix at Monza. In the last production year of the Benz Sons Company, 1923, 350 units were built. During the following year, 1924, Benz built 2 additional 8/25 HP units of the automobile manufactured by this company, tailored for his personal use, which he never sold. They are still preserved. Toured Daimler-Benz and the first Mercedes-Benz in 1926. The German economic crisis worsened. In 1923 Benz and CIE produced only 1,382 units in Mannheim, and DMG made only 1,020 in Stuttgart. The average cost of an automobile was 25 million marks because of rapid inflation. Negotiations between the two companies resumed, and in 1924 they signed an agreement of mutual interest valid until the year 2000. Both enterprises standardized design, production, purchasing, sales, and advertising, marketing their automobile models jointly, although keeping their respective brands. On June 28, 1926, Benz and CIE and DMG finally merged as the Daimler-Benz Company, baptizing all of its automobiles as Mercedes-Benz, honoring the most important model of the DMG automobiles, the 1902 Mercedes 35 HP, along with the Benz name. The name of Mercedes 35 HP had been chosen for 10-year-old Mercedes Jelinek, the daughter of Emil Jelinek, who had set the specifications for the new model. Between 1900 and 1909 he was a member of DMG's board of management, however had resigned long before the merger. Benz was a member of the new Daimler-Benz board of management for the remainder of his life. A new logo was created in 1926, consisting of a 3-pointed star, representing Daimler's motto, engines for land, air, and water, surrounded by traditional laurels from the Benz logo, and the brand of all of its automobiles was labeled Mercedes-Benz. Model names would follow the brand name in the same convention as today. The next year, 1927, the number of units sold tripled to 7,918 and the diesel line was launched for truck production. In 1928, the Mercedes-Benz SSK was presented. On April 4, 1929, Benz died at his home in Ladenburg at the age of 84 from a bronchial inflammation. Until her death on May 5, 1944, Bertha Benz continued to reside in their last home. Members of the family resided in the home for 30 more years. The Benz home has now been designated as historic and is used as a scientific meeting facility for a non-profit foundation, the Gottlieb Daimler and Karl Benz Foundation. Legacy. The Karl Benz Gymnasium Ladenburg in Ladenburg, where he lived until his death, is named in his honor, as is the Auto Museum Dr. Karl Benz, also located in Ladenburg. In 1984, Benz was inducted into the Automotive Hall of Fame and the European Automotive Hall of Fame. In popular culture. In 2011, a dramatized television film about the life of Karl and Bertha Benz was made, named Karl and Bertha de, which premiered on May 11 and was aired by Das Erste on May 23. A trailer of the film and a making-of special were released on YouTube. Benz was also featured in the first episode of the History television miniseries The Cars That Made the World. Thank you for watching this video.